I was told to make a public service announcement. I do not have COVID, okay? Now, I had it at one point. I'm okay now. But I've had other medical emergencies recently. Oh, I just want the sympathy. That's what I come for, you know? I got into a bit of a bar fight, you know? It's okay. I told them not to hit me in the face because I was going to be on TV this morning. So, no, I'm just kidding. It was a soccer accident. I fractured my wrist, broke my wrist, or a bone in my wrist. So I'm very well taken care of, and I feel great. And part of that is probably the extra strength ibuprofen I took. But anyway, so I'm going to, just another public service announcement. I'm going to use a bit of a war analogy in my homily this morning. And I just want to acknowledge, right, these days war is on our minds a lot with Ukraine. And so we continue to pray for the people there. And we'll be praying for them, of course, as a community in our prayers of the faithful. But I want to introduce you to a guy. His name is General Stanley Mcchrystal. Now, he's best known for his command. He's a gifted leader. His command of the Joint Special Forces Command, called JSOC, also known as JSOC. And he came to kind of prominence as a leader during the mid-2000s during the war in Iraq. Now, JSOC carried out some of the most sophisticated and dangerous military operations of any organization anywhere in the world. And during his time, General Stanley, they were particularly invested in fighting counter-terrorism, specifically in Iraq and Al-Qaeda. Now, by almost every metric, the JSOC operations were wildly successful, okay? They had about a 99% success rate in achieving their objectives. They experienced extremely low casualties, and they were running about 5 operations a month in Iraq. Now, the reality is that on most battlefields, that would have been enough. But the United States was facing a kind of enemy that they had never faced before. A decentralized network that was adaptable and constantly shifting and changing. And so that they found that even though by almost all traditional metrics they were wildly successful in what they did, they were winning every single battle, but it wasn't enough to turn the tide of war. They were still losing the war. Now, in many ways, the discipline, the military precision, the hierarchy of command and control, which in the past would have been a real strength, the success of that was precisely the thing that prevented them from their future success, from success on the battlefield. Now, often that is the case, that the greatest threat to future success is our current success. That's true in most areas and dimensions of our lives, whether personally or professionally, organizationally, because the more successful we become, the harder it becomes to change. Right? If you just think about it, when you're successful, you take fewer risks. There's more on the line. There's more to lose. You've got an audience to keep, a reputation to maintain. You make relative comparisons to how other people around you are doing, and if you're doing better, that's often good enough, or it feels like it is. But the truth is, you gotta take risks in life. Take, for example, the soccer field. Father Simon plays it safe, right? He goes maybe 70, 80%. But I go all in, okay? I'm willing to sacrifice the body and do what it takes to win. I've heard it said that faith is spelled R-I-S-K. All faith implies some dimension of risk-taking. Now, I watched General Stanley give this leadership talk, and he explained the kind of deep organizational change that he led JSOC through. And they went, and it was this incredibly difficult transformation of their organization and the way they did operations. But eventually, they went from 5 effective military operations a month to hundreds. And they did it by changing everything about the way they operated. And that eventually began to turn the tide of the war in Iraq. Now, after watching him give this talk, it got me thinking, and this was months and months ago, about almost 8 to 10 months ago. And something began to stir inside of me. Something really was kind of, itching inside of me. And as I was reflecting and applying this to our own church, St. Benedict, I was reflecting on some of the success, right? By many metrics, St. Benedict has been a wildly successful church. Right up until COVID, we were growing physical attendance every year. Now, we didn't let COVID stop us. We did all kinds of new and innovative things. Our alphas went online. We continued to grow. We brought more people to Jesus during COVID than ever before. Our reach broadened. We doubled the size of people in our life groups, the number of people. Our impact on the local community is greater than it's ever been before through our 10% tithe and serving the poor and the homeless. And globally, we're influencing the conversation about what a church on mission looks like through Divine Renovation Ministries, for example. And so people look to us as a kind of leader. All around the world, there's thousands of churches that are influenced by what we do here. And yet, is that enough? In many ways, we're winning every battle. But are we winning the war? I started to reflect on the size of our parish, the community in which we live. Now, the reality is that we have, in our parish boundaries, and it's kind of represented on Google Maps, they're roughly that area, we have 60,000 people living inside of our parish boundaries. There's about 1,000 people who will come to church today. These 60,000 people have been entrusted to us as souls in our care. 60,000 people that, for many, are struggling with isolation and fear. Every one of those 60,000 people has a name and a face and a family and a story. They're aunts and uncles, cousins and children, grandparents. And some of them feel anxiety and hopelessness. Many of them feel lost and broken. Their marriages are on the brink. People are trapped in cycles of shame and addiction, or don't know who they are. They feel purposeless, and they don't know the life-transforming difference of knowing Jesus. They don't know that there is a God who created them for a purpose, who calls them to himself, a God who is for them and loves them. And as I continued to kind of struggle with this, and I realized, 60,000 people, that's enough people to fit the stadium in Detroit, Michigan, where the Detroit Lions play. Think of all those people. And I started to do some kind of math and about kind of the growth trajectory of the church and how many people we reach every year, introducing them to Jesus through Alpha and the different things that we do. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. It doesn't matter whether it's 10 years or 1,000 years. Given the demographic shifts of people leaving our community and joining and leaving, we will never, ever bring Jesus to those 60,000 people. Never. Doesn't matter how long, how many years, unless something changes. And I just felt like the Lord say to me, Alex, you're winning every battle, but you're losing the war. And yet, we know that God is always working and doing new things. And that I think that part of this was part of what God is doing, stirring something inside of me, a discontent with the status quo. And God is always preparing his church for new and exciting things, just like we see in the book of Acts. The earliest church, explosively alive in the power of the Holy Spirit, facing all kinds of challenges that before them, whether it was a hostile culture in which they lived, whether it was internal division. And we see the Holy Spirit stirring something new in them that led them to this moment that we read about in the book of Acts today. What we read was an excerpt from a letter that came out of a council, the Council of Jerusalem. You see, up until that point, the Jews, the earliest Christians, they saw themselves as a kind of Jewish sect. That they existed for the people in their community, their insular community, other Jews, and that they were sharing this news about Jesus, his death and resurrection. But the Holy Spirit had begun to give a vision to members of the church like Peter and the apostles. And he began to do new things like work signs and miracles in the lives of non-Jews, beginning to show them that God has something bigger and broader and bolder than anything they had ever seen before, that they were called to be a church for the whole world, that they were called to go out and bring the life-transforming news of the gospel to all peoples. And so they gathered in a council to wrestle with this, but whether that's what they were called to do. And they made the decision to do something new and bold and exciting, to follow the work of the Holy Spirit. And we believe that the Holy Spirit has been doing something similar in our lives here at St. Benedict among our parishioners and our leaders and different groups of people. And I'll tell you what happened. About a year and a half ago, we were in a meeting with our parish council. And it was, we're dead in the middle of COVID. So many things had shifted and changed. There were all kinds of new challenges. And we were discussing, where are we going as a church? And so we went back to our parish vision statement. St. Benedict Parish is a healthy and growing faith community that brings people to Christ, forms disciples, and sends them out to transform the world. Our members commit to worship, to grow, to serve, to connect, to give. And as we were reflecting on this and praying about it, someone said, hey guys, hold on a second. This is no longer a vision of the future. This just describes who we are today. It's a description statement. And that, we're like, whoa, wait a second. 10 years ago when this was written, think about how far this parish has come and all the things that it has done and all the successes it has seen. This at one point was a vision of the future. That is an exciting, bold vision. But we've arrived. Right? We are a healthy, growing faith community that brings people to Jesus, forms disciples, and sends them out. We're influencing, again, the global church in many different ways. And so we began to ask our question, well, what now? And so that initiated a process of prayer and discernment with all kinds of different groups of people giving their input and sharing the dreams that God had been putting on their heart. It started with Father Simon and myself and some core key leaders, and then it moved to our leadership team, and we prayed, and we gathered the pastoral council, we prayed together, and then the staff, and more recently we gathered all our ministry leaders as a parish to talk about this, to pray about it, to ask what God is putting on our hearts, the dreams for our parish, and where the Holy Spirit is leading us. And so we want to share with you a glimpse of that. This is what we've come to. We feel the Holy Spirit is leading us a new vision of the future. Just encapsulate it in a simple statement that's going to need to be unpacked. But here it is. St. Benedict Parish is an explosively alive community where people discover Jesus, become missionary disciples, and go out to transform the world. See, we've reached a kind of transition point. That God is calling us to something bigger and bolder. There are 60,000 people in our immediate mission field that we are called to reach. And we'll only do that if we are empowered by the Holy Spirit, if we become an explosively alive community in the power of the Holy Spirit. And so over the next couple of weeks, we're going to unpack some of what these mean over these next 5 weeks, 4 weeks after today. An explosively alive community where people discover Jesus, become missionary disciples, go out and transform the world. And so what we're asking you to do is just begin to pray about this vision, to pray about what you're hearing, to dream with us as we go through this. And at the end of the 4 weeks, we're going to send out a survey and ask you to share kind of what God is stirring in your heart and how that intersects with our parish vision. Now, I'd like you just to dream with me for a moment, okay? We have to take risks, right? You got to break a wrist every once in a while to do new things. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Just going to invite the Holy Spirit to come. Come, Holy Spirit, come. I'm not going to ask you to dream with me for a moment. Come, Holy Spirit, come. Why don't you just say that with me? Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit, come. One more time. Come, Holy Spirit, come. Keep your eyes closed and just dream with me. What does an explosively alive St. Benedict Parish look like 11 years from now? 2033, 2,000-year anniversary of Jesus' death and resurrection. Imagine you walk, you pull into St. Benedict Parish parking lot, and there's ample parking, 3-story parking garage maybe, who knows. And you step through those front doors and you immediately feel overcome with this spirit of joy in your heart as you see all these amazing people who are just so alive in the Holy Spirit, smiling faces, people you love and who love you. Mass begins, it's standing room only, maybe it's here, maybe we've outgrown this place, who knows, but it's standing room only, packed to the gills. And as the music begins, the songs of worship, everyone is singing full-hearted and full-throated, and it's just these overwhelmed with this song of praise rising up to God. And as we begin to worship God, something begins to happen. The Holy Spirit begins to move. People are overwhelmed by this profound sense of peace that they didn't even know was possible. That people who are experiencing anxiety and depression, that these kinds of things just lift almost instantly. That people experience healing physically, emotionally, spiritually. That miraculous signs are happening. That people are healed physically. That who knows, the blind see, the lame walk, the deaf can hear. And these things happen they're extraordinary, but they're just an ordinary part of what happens here at St. Benedict Parish. People who walk into this church with doubts, who may not even believe, are overcome by these powerful experiences of God's presence, that they cannot deny that God is real. And they walk out of this church as believers. There's a Pentecost experience happening every Sunday. And that's just the beginning. That's just ground zero of this explosion that happens as things move outward. It's the launching pad of thousands and thousands of parishioners who go back to the 65,000 in our community, who are going into their homes, in their workplaces, into their schools, into their social groups and neighborhoods, and they're sharing the love of Jesus in love and deeds in such a way that it's transforming the city from the inside out. And they're not afraid to share their faith. In fact, they can't but help share their faith because of the things that God has done for them and the things that they've seen with their own eyes. And they want to share that with everybody. This army of everyday missionaries bringing the gospel message into all dimensions of human life and changing everything, transforming the world. What dreams and visions is God putting on your heart? Holy Spirit, lead us into the future and the vision to which you are calling us. St. Benedict Parish, an explosively alive faith community, where people discover Jesus, become missionary disciples, and go out to transform the world.